Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you the other way of associating data, which is by using object references. So before we get started, I'm going to make a new file here in the same directory, and I'll call this one references.js. And I'm going to just copy everything over into that file from our previous lesson, and I'm going to alter this. The first thing I'll do is change the database that we use, just so that we're not conflicting things and we're not overriding what we just previously did. So I'm going to make the name blog_demo_2. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of a lot of stuff in here, pretty much everything aside from our schemas that we have in the models. And I'll start by talking about what it means to reference data versus embedding it. So what we did last time in the last video was we embedded data where we had a user that looked something like this with a name, and there was an email in there as well, and then there was a posts array, and each post in that array was actually stored inside the array, just like this, where title and content. There we go. And we could have, 5, 6, as many as we want in here, different posts inside the post array. Now what I'm going to show you in this lesson is very similar, except what we actually do is have a post array, and inside all that we're going to store in here, rather than the actual posts, we're going to have a bunch of IDs. So we'll have these long IDs that look like that, and so on. And these IDs will correspond to individual posts. So then we'll have a post over here that has ID equal to this, and it will have title equal to something else, and so on. So again, the key difference is that we're storing IDs, which is where the name reference comes from. We're referencing the ID of another post rather than embedding the entire post. Okay, so let's get started. And we have to make a few changes to our schema. Rather than having posts be an array of post schema, what we actually do, make it an array, but we're going to pass an object in. And the object is going to look like this. So let me space this out just a little bit. And our object is going to have two main properties, type and ref. And type is going to be mongoose.schema.types.object ID, and ref will be post. So let's talk about what I just did here. I've said that in the user schema, there's a posts attribute, and it's an array, but rather than being an array of posts like we have here, where it's an array of the post schema, it's actually an array of object IDs, and this is just the way that we write that syntax. It's a mongoose object ID belonging to a post. And we can save, and just to make sure we didn't do anything wrong, we can run the file, make sure we don't get an error. Great. Now let's get started by creating a single user that we can then add posts to later. So we'll do user.create, and this one will give a email of bob@gmail.com, and a name will be Bob Belcher, and we'll save. And then we'll just leave it like that, and we'll just assume that this is going to work rather than adding the callback in. So this is just going to create our first user. So let's run the file. All right, so we don't see anything, but we could go into Mongo and check it out. So show DBs, use blog_demo_2, and then we can do db.users.find, and we have one user with his name, Bob Belcher, email bob@gmail.com, and posts, that's empty because we haven't added any posts in yet. So let's get out of here. And the next thing I want to do is add a post to this user. So I'm going to get rid of that create statement, and I'll comment it out just so that you can see it. And what I'll do is make a new post, so post.create, and we're making it independently of the user. So we're making that post, and we'll give it a title of how to cook the best burger, and then content, and we'll just fill it with blah blah blahs for now, just like that. And we'll save, and that should make us a post, And just to make sure this time, let's add in the callback, error, and post, and we'll just console.log the post, and we're not going to handle the error just for the sake of time. And run the file, and we've now added a new post to the database with an ID. Remember this ID. Remember the whole thing, 562583788. No, I'm just kidding, but remember what it looks like. And then we have our content and then our title. All right, so let's get out of there. So what we want to do next is talk about how we can connect a post and a user using that ID. And to do that, I'm actually going to go through the steps of making another post. So let's call this How to Cook the Best Burger Part 2. And this will make a new post. And once we save that post, we're then going to find the user Bob. So we're going to do a user.find, and we'll do find one. And we'll find where name, let's do email this time, where email is bob@gmail.com. And then we'll run this code afterwards, error, and then we'll call this found user. Okay, so a lot going on. So we're creating a post. Once the post has been created, we're finding a user, in this case, this user here that we've already created. And then we're going to handle the error if we need to. Otherwise, we're then going to add the post into the user's posts. So it's found user dot posts, which is what we called it up here. And we're going to push in dot push post. And post is referring to the post that we just created that was saved to the database with title, How to Cook the Best Burger 2, content, blah, 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 blah. We save it. If it works, we have a post variable that's storing the post. And then we're finding a user, in this case, the one with email bob@gmail.com. And then if we find it, we're then going to add the new post into that user's posts array. Then let's save that. So afterwards, we need to do another found user.save. And yes, we need another callback. And this one will have error, and let's call this data, just to make it really clear what's happening. And in here, I'm just going to, again, handle the error. And then, if there is no error, going to console.log data. All right, man, we have a lot here. So create a post, find a user, and then take that post, push it into the user's posts, save the user, and then when that's done, print out the data. Let's see what we get. All right, so it worked. Here's our user, name, Bob Belcher, email, here's the user's ID. And then inside of posts, all that we have is an array with one item, and it's an object ID. Versus when we had the embed.js, where we were working with embedded data, we had the entire post, so that this array, inside of it, we actually saw the data. Now we're just seeing the ID. So let's go add one more. So we'll do part 3, and the text of that one, instead of blah, 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 it's just going to be gibberish, just so that it's easier to tell apart in the console. And we'll add that post. Now we have 2 object IDs here, and each one corresponds to an individual post. Okay, so that's how we can associate them, but now we need to figure out how do we take this object ID and find the correct post. Let's say that I want to find a user, and then I want to find that user's posts as well, and not just the IDs, but I want all of the data. So I'm going to clear the console, and I'm also going to comment out this behemoth here. And so what we want to do is find user, and then find all posts for that user. And there's actually a way to do that in one go. So we need to find the user first. So that's user.find, and we'll do find one again. And then we need to pass in what we're looking for, which will be email, where it's bob@gmail.com. And then this is something new. So we haven't seen this before. Dot populate. And we're going to populate posts. And then dot exec. And I'll explain all this in just a moment. Okay. So what we've done here, we've written a longer query that has multiple pieces. So we're finding a user, and then we're chaining this .populate posts, which will actually populate the field posts, look up all those object IDs, find the correct data, and then stick it in the post array. And then we run .exec to actually start the query. So it's a little bit weird. We're finding one, but notice that we're not using a callback in here, and we're chaining .populate, and then we're giving it .exec at the very end, which will actually make all of this happen. So then we're passing the callback into .exec because that's when we're executing the code. And if we did this right, so let's check if there's an error first, console.log error. Otherwise, hopefully our user is going to have all the posts pre-populated inside the posts attribute. So we'll console.log user. And let's try running this, make sure everything's commented out except for this. Let's run. And what do you know? It worked. So we get a user, name is Bob Belcher, email bob@gmail.com. But now post isn't just an array of object IDs. It actually has the full post in there, both of them. So you can see it does have an ID, but we have content and title, content and title. So to summarize everything that we did, we stored data so that it looks like this here with object IDs. You can see the two object IDs. And then we made a second query to retrieve the data, and we filled in the posts array with all of the data using .populate.exec. So you might be wondering why we would use one versus the other. When would we embed data versus when would we use object ID references? And this is a really good and really important question that we'll address as we use them inside of our Yelp Camp app. The short answer is that it depends. And you can get by using either style in pretty much every situation. However, there usually is one, either using references or embedding data, that is going to lend itself better to whatever you're doing. And we'll talk about that as we go through Yelp Camp and we start to add in comments and users, and we add in ratings and photos and all these different features. Some of them are going to be embedded and some of them are going to be referenced.